Why did you kill John Lennon?
I thought by killing him, I would acquire his fame.
The reason I killed John Lennon was to gain prominence, to promote the reading of J.D. Salinger's The Catcher in the Rye, 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 The Catcher in the Rye.
Imagine there's no heaven. Sees if you try.
I would acquire his fame.
No hell below us. Above us only skies.
MK Ultra is a CIA program started nearly 25 years ago to control human behavior through the use of drugs, electric shock, psychosurgery, and other rather sophisticated techniques. The CIA now says it has discovered documents relating to the program that apparently were not filed in the right place. Acting under the Freedom of Information Act, a former State Department official, John Marks, has obtained a number of other documents on MK Ultra. He made them public today. Bill Downs has that story.
Early in December 1980, an unknown young man traveled to New York City to kill the most famous rock singer in the world. This is his story, told by those who knew him and loved him. This is also the story the killer told afterwards to detectives and psychiatrists. And it is a story about the power of stories, and of one story in particular. A story that took place somewhere else, in someone's imagination. A story from the words of an old song that would become the key to a killing. On the evening of Monday, December 8th, 1980, the young man stood outside John Lennon's New York apartment. Here, in the killer's own words, is what happened next.
It was a very long day. So I'm sitting there. It's dark. And this limo pulls up. And John got out. And he came up the pathway. And he looked at me. I heard this voice. Not an audible voice, but an inaudible voice saying over and over, do it, 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 do it. I guess that was inside. And I pulled the .38 revolver out of my pocket. I went into what's called a combat stance, and I fired at his back. 5 steady shots.
Say a little prayer.
Man, he was a white man, he was big, and he was arguing with the doorman. And then all of a sudden, they heard 5, 6 shots, and that was it.
The cops pulled John Lennon out and put him in the back.
He was shot by an unknown, at this time, white male. Was in custody.
Pushing the barrier
It's Monday, the 8th of December, 1980. At 10 a.m., John Lennon leaves the Dakota building for his favorite local barber.
He just wanted a haircut. I don't know, maybe I have those hairs still, I don't know. I used to keep his hair. Well, the day started with Leibowitz's photograph.
As the photographer Annie Leibovitz completes her photo shoot for Rolling Stone magazine, and a cover that was to become world famous, John's fan, the amateur photographer Paul Goresh, arrives as usual.
I got to the Dakota around 11:45 in the morning. And when I got there, it was a nice mild day. It was for December 8th. The only other person there was a guy standing with a long overcoat with a fur collar and a fur hat. And he had a scarf on, and he was holding Double Fantasy under his elbow. And he says to me, "Are you waiting for Lennon?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "My name's Mark, I'm from Hawaii." And I said, "I'm Paul, I'm from New Jersey." And he said, "Oh." He said, "Do you work for him?" I said, "No." He said, "I came all the way from Hawaii to get my album signed." So I said, "Where are you staying while you're in the city?" And with that, he seemed to change his whole demeanor from like a dope to an aggressive person. And he said, "Why do you want to know?" And I told him, "Go back where you were standing and leave me alone. Leave me alone. Leave me alone. Leave me alone. Leave me alone."
It's 4 p.m. and still hanging around at the entrance, fan and amateur photographer Paul Goresh sees the RKO team coming out of the building with their recording equipment.
Now a little bustle, people starts coming out. I start noticing a lot of silver cases and whatnot, so I figured John will be coming out soon.
Next thing, John comes walking out looking for a car that was going to take he and Yoko over to the record plant.
So he turned to Jose and he said, "Jose, where's my car?" And he said, Jose was the night doorman who had come on. His name is Jose Perdomo. And he said, "It's not here yet, Mr. Lennon."
He's looking around, and I thought it was, for a split second, I'm thinking to myself, boy, this is pretty amazing. I mean, here's John Lennon outside of New York. I thought of that quickly, and I said I just dismissed him. In this town, it's no big deal, and that was it.
He said to me, "Don't forget to get your book." He said, "Did you get your album signed?" I said, "I'll get it. I'll get my album signed tomorrow. I'll get the book before I leave." And as he was talking to me, the guy with the overcoat approached him from the left. And he didn't say a word. He just held the album out in front of John. And John turned to him and looked at the album and said, "Do you want it signed?" And the guy nodded. He didn't say a word. He just nodded. So it looked like a picture, so I snapped a couple pictures. And the first picture I took was John signing the album, looking at the album. And he nodded, and he took the album, and he just backed away.
I just had to let it go.
So John is saying, "Well, our car isn't here. You're going to the airport." "Yeah, would you mind giving us a ride?" "Hop on in. We're headed in the same direction."
So as he was getting into the limousine, I took a picture of him getting into the limousine. And that turned out to be the last picture of him alive. He got in the limousine and he was facing me. And as it was pulling away, John looked out the window and waved to me and smiled. And I waved goodbye to him. And I would never see him again.
While John and Yoko were busy at the studio, a few blocks away in Central Park, a young ABC TV newsman has a motorbike accident. It is to make him a key figure in the night's events.
Cops came, ambulance came from St. Luke's Roosevelt. And I remember riding in the ambulance and one of the EMTs said, "You're lucky. It's a Monday night, it's quiet. There's a doctor at the ER. She's a young lady, you're gonna love her. She's friendly and easygoing, and they're gonna take you 1, 2, 3.
Back at the studio, John and Yoko put the last touches to the final track they will ever record. Its title is to have a sad significance.
So the last thing we did was to record Walking on Thin Ice. It's still hard for me to talk, to think about it, because it's a song that just came to me. But when you listen to the song, it's about us. And then when we were in the car, I said, oh, shall we then go to a restaurant or something before we go home? He said, no, I want to see Sean before he goes to sleep. I said, well, he's probably asleep by now, I was thinking, but okay, he wanted to see Sean, so he wants. So, but even if we went to the restaurant, doesn't mean anything. It didn't, make us avoid anything horrible. And the car stopped, and we got out of the car. It was really terrible.
The unknown young man, 3 hours after he killed John Lennon. His name was Mark David Chapman. This police video shot that night through a two-way mirror marked the beginning of the investigation of what turned him into a killer. Police had found Chapman minutes after the shooting, waiting quietly at the scene of the crime. He had dropped his gun. In its place, he held a paperback novel. Inside, he had written, "To Holden Caulfield, from Holden Caulfield. This is my statement." To Holden Caulfield, from Holden Caulfield. This is my statement. From that night onward, the catcher in the rye haunted the investigation of Lennon's death.
Let me have your date of birth, okay?
May 10, 1955.
And that makes you how old now?
25.
Okay. And you spell your first name?
M-A-R-K.
In prison interviews with detectives and psychiatrists, Chapman constantly returned to the catcher in the rye. Anyone, he said, who understood the book would understand why.
And you read the book, and you think about me and the terrible fall, and you read, "I'm sorry I told so many people about it. Don't ever tell anybody anything." And it might hit you. You might really come to the full scope of understanding of what I've stood for in my life, what the terrible fall was, and what I'm doing now, and what I will be doing in the future. It just might come to you. I'm praying that it will, and that you realize that something very extraordinary has happened with an extraordinary book, and without ego, an extraordinary person. And Lennon, an extraordinary person. The Beatles, an extraordinary cultural movement in the 60s and early 70s. Probably the cultural experience, musically and culturally. They changed the world as we know it. and I changed them.
At his trial, Chapman pled guilty. His testimony was never heard. The only statement he made was to read a passage from The Catcher in the Rye.
The reason I killed John Lennon was to gain prominence, to promote the reading of J.D. Salinger's The Catcher in the Rye. I'm not saying I'm the Messiah or nothing like that. If you read the book and if you understand my past, but you seem to understand my past pretty well, and you would see that I am indeed the catcher in the rye of this generation.